friends, and welcome to worship at Unity Church. Welcome to this time we set aside each week for reflection on those things that matter most, including our connection to one another. This morning we worship both in person and online, a congregation gathered in time rather than in a single place. May we all enter into worship fully, not held back by fear or distraction or the unfamiliarity of new ways. Welcome whatever arises in your spirit during this time we share. If this is your first time attending a service, we invite you to complete a visitor card available in the pews and online so that we can provide you with more information about our congregational life. Visitors are also invited to attend a Finding Yourself at Unity conversation each Sunday focused on a different topic about Unity Church. Today's class will offer a building tour, and you can join the group upstairs in the Gannett room on the far side of that wing of the church. You can also join online. Today, we invite the congregation, both those of you here today and those at home, to join us on a short pilgrimage to the Rondo Commemorative Plaza, which is at Fisk and Concordia, just a few blocks from here. After the 11 o'clock service at 12:30 today, we will be joined there by Marvin Anderson, who is a co-founder of the Plaza, and he will talk about the history of this neighborhood and several reparations projects in the Rondo neighborhood. He'll share comments and lead a discussion with us, and we'll all reflect on what we learn from the history of our place in Rondo. There will be hot beverages, and it will be short. So I hope you will join Merrill and me there. And if you haven't yet RSVP'd, just come. It'll be fine. There are more details in the insert to your program today. After the service, Merrill and I look forward to greeting those of you who are here in person out in the entrance, and those joining online are welcome to attend a Zoom coffee hour. Now, let us enter into worship with the ringing of the bell.
morning. One reflection in Mark Nepo's daybook, The Book of Awakening, begins, as humans, we are relentlessly in cycle. The mind builds a shell to protect its turtle spirit, but the shell muffles the spirit. Till outgrowing the shell, we devise ways to break it. We build the shell, then tear it down. We build it thinner, we tear it down. Yet only between constructions are we thoroughly touched. Only between encasements are we punctured by love. In 2019, my wife Denise and I had the great privilege of traveling to Boston with the adult version of Unity's Boston pilgrimage. For me, it ended up being doubly meaningful because in addition to discovering some of the roots of this church, I grew up in Western Massachusetts, and it was a sort of homecoming. We were able to add a few days onto the front end of the trip. We connected with my mom and her husband and took our two boys to places some of our ancestors had lived and to the very woods where I spent a lot of my childhood. One thing that separates pilgrimage from tourism is this breaking of the shell. It's a chance to examine a place anew, and through the experience, examine yourself. Perhaps shed certainties that have become unhelpful, or crack open places that have calcified, to see the things that have become invisible, like familiar wallpaper that we overlook out of habit. I love Nepo's description of this as a lifelong cycle of renewal. As folks have gradually come back to the sanctuary, respecting that we all have different timelines for doing that, I have started to hear stories of rediscovery, what the sunlight is like in this space, or the sounds or the music. Perhaps the coming year is a chance to see the whole thing anew. Come, let us worship together. Will you join us in singing hymn number 113, Where is Our Holy Church?
in body or spirit, for the unison reading printed in your order of service. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Please be seated. Join me in a moment of silence. And in our Advent tradition, we will begin and end the silence with the words and the song printed in your order of service. Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the heart of this and every sacred community. Speaking here in this sanctuary built on the homelands of the Dakota and Ojibwe nations, we honor with gratitude the people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations and their ongoing contributions to this region. We confess the injustices we have committed against the Dakota and Ojibwe nations and pledge to interrupt this legacy, beginning with open-hearted listening, honest storytelling about the place where we gather, and acts of healing. We stand at the side of parents and teachers and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children, with those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability or addiction. We pray for our neighbors in prison, for those who care for family members in ill health, and those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity and courage face their final days, and by those who rise above heartbreak to challenge oppression in all its forms. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world, and for the people of this courageous congregation, as together we live into our longing to embody and help to build the beloved community. And will you pray with me now for these we name? We hold in our hearts Rebecca Flood and Ruth McKinsey and Rebecca's mother, Rita Flood, and their wider family as they grieve the death of Rebecca's sister-in-law and Rita's daughter-in-law, Patty Flood, in Indiana Thursday evening. Though Patty suffered from several health conditions, the suddenness of her death was unexpected and leaves a gaping sorrow. A memorial service will be held in Indiana later this week. We share the news from Kate Wilcox and Kevin Harris that they returned home from Mayo for a quiet Thanksgiving together in their own home. Unfortunately, late last night, Kevin was transferred by ambulance to Regents Hospital, where he has again been admitted. We continue to pray for his strength and recovery and healing as we hold Kevin and his whole family in our love. We celebrate the life and mourn the death of poet Robert Bly, one of Minnesota's literary giants, an outspoken critic of war, a prolific poet, author, and generative translator who brought the work of other poets to our English-speaking world. And finally, we name our sorrowful gratitude over the conviction of the 3 men who coldly killed Ahmaud Arbery in 2020. We find in this conviction hope that our justice system might one day more reliably protect all people, especially those whose identity, race, or religion have put them at risk of violence and harm. May we stand in compassionate solidarity with our neighbors here at home and all around the world. May they and may we be instruments of a just and lasting peace. I now invite you here in the sanctuary and at home to speak aloud or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts the names of those you would like to lift today in worship. And will you pray with me? Holy One, source of all being and promise of all our becoming, on a pilgrimage of the heart, you are both the path and destination. You are the journey and the return home. Together, as we take a pilgrimage in place, we turn our attention to the holy ground beneath our feet and to this hour built on more than 100 years of gathering in this sanctuary, in this place, to worship, to pray, to sing, to lament, and to rejoice. As we recall the words of those who have worshiped here across the years, we listen for the threads of truth and faith woven through this community today as we gather here and online. Open our hearts to the lessons of history and relationship, to the teachings of our shared faith, and to the promise of Advent on this first Sunday of this season, that hope and life and love abide not somewhere else, but here and now, and that the shelter of this sanctuary holds us now and always, whether we are gathered here or scattered near or far, as we carry the gifts of this community with us and share them far beyond these walls. May it be so, and amen. Almost thing to navigate the forest we have up here today. And there is a beautiful scent in the air from it. So if you are viewing this service online and if you have time and ability, you might just want to come down to the church during the next week or weeks and slip into the sanctuary during a weekday when it's empty and just enjoy the space and the sacredness embedded here. Today, as we collect the offering in this service, you know that your support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. The contributions you make on Sunday enable us to do the work that we have pledged to do with our church community and out in the world. Your pledges and regular giving make that possible. Each Sunday, we are able to give the majority of our offering to community partners with whom we share common cause. If you would like to nominate an organization to receive the offering, please do. You will find a nomination form on the website, and the generosity team that selects these recipients welcomes your nominations. Today, the larger portion of our offering will be shared with Frogtown Radio WFNU, a volunteer-run radio station. WFNU airs weekly shows that range in topics from music of all genres to arts, politics, youth talk shows, Black Lives Matter and Asian storytelling, conflict resolution, recovery, and more. You see how we share common cause with them. This collection will help to pay for software and equipment costs and training for local artists and change makers eager to produce their own shows. Will the ushers please come forward? Please give as generously as you can today. We dedicate these offerings and ourselves to the greater work of this community, which is weaving a tapestry of love we share with the world. One day last year, while the church building was closed for the pandemic and the staff was working from home, we began our weekly online staff meeting with a check-in question, as we were wont to do. That week, the question was, what is one place in the church building you miss and why? And it was beautiful how many different places in the building we named. There was the sanctuary, of course, and the parish hall, Ames Chapel, and the kitchen for sure, the front desk, the DeCramer room, the main lobby, the fountain and the garden behind it, the Anderson Library, the junior high rooms, and yes, the bell tower. And as we named the building's many rooms and parts, it was as if the building rose up around us, whole and holy, even as we sat in our separate homes and met in Zoom. It was a building of many rooms that more than 1,000 of us today claim as our spiritual home, a place where we can be our whole selves, loved, accepted, and forgiven, and where we can grow into our best selves, loving, accepting, and forgiving. As with many things we may have taken for granted before the pandemic, our absence from this building has, for some, increased our appreciation of this holy place, this building known as Unity Church for over 100 years. What makes it holy? What makes any place sacred? We know this land was holy long before this building was constructed on it. The Dakota and the Ojibwe people who lived here in this region for as long as stories tell and who dwell here still today have always insisted that the land itself is sacred. We, relative newcomers to this place, are latently learning that reverence, while also earnestly seeking ways to repair our broken relationship with these indigenous nations. In addition, though, as Unitarian Universalists, worshiping here for 116 years, this building itself is made holy by a history of words and song, of silence, of rituals, and fellowship shared by people who have gathered here across the decades in common faith and intention, and by what we've experienced here individually and collectively as encounters with our own soul's truth, with one another, and with the wider world. Encounters made meaningful and memorable in particular places here in this church. Where in this building have you encountered meaning or wholeness, healing or acceptance, hope or the tenderness of shared sorrow? What place in this church would you name as holy today? Turn to one person near you and share just one place in this building or one aspect of it that you treasure. It might be the light that moves across the reredos during worship. Could be the chatter of parish hall or the scent of something cooking in the kitchen. Name just one place or part of this building that speaks to you. And if you're at home or sitting here with no one near you, you might close your eyes and take an imagined walk through the building, remembering a place that means something to you. I invite you now to turn to one another and name one place. Thank you all for sharing. I hope you continue this sharing in person or online as you reach out to one another. This was actually my way of bringing your voices into the sanctuary, which is one of my favorite things, to hear the murmuring of conversation in this space, which reminds me one of the things that makes it holy are the words and voices shared here in this space. Often the places we name as holy are made so not only by our own experience of them, but by their history and the way history echoes across time. Whether we are conscious of its particulars or not, we might feel the heft of this history, its hope, its grief, its promises, joys, its invitations. So now, join me in a pilgrimage through time, hearing some of the history of this place, as found in just a few words from just a few voices that have been spoken here. Words nested here in the bones of this building, and in the body and the heart and the memory of this congregation. Imagine yourself, if you will, arriving today at the Portland Avenue entrance, as some of you did this morning, feeling the cold autumn wind, and perhaps wondering where to find hope in this darkening season. And you pass the cornerstone of the building, right out there, dated 1905. Perhaps unaware that a time capsule in that cornerstone holds these words from the Reverend William Channing Gannett, minister of this congregation before the building was constructed between 1877 and 1883. Gannett said this:
"And again the deed is done. The ripened seed vessels hold the hope of the world. New root, new stem, new leaf, new bud, and all the possibilities that sleep in them are there wrapped up together. In these, the next spring's resurrection, next summer's glory, next autumn's gold and red lie already in embryo, and everything is safe. Fear not, O lands. Be not afraid, O fields. Let the leaves die and the cold come out of the north."
And everything is safe. Fear not, O lands. Be not afraid, O fields. Gannett poetically reminds us that even when the seasons of the natural world bring death and loss everywhere we look, as on this late November day, new life is yet in bud and will return again. Whether we come together online or in person, our connection to one another is made holy by this insistence across 150 years of this congregation's history and the 450 years of Unitarian history, the insistence that life and love can be trusted to abide, even and especially in the midst of loss and death. It is no accident, I think, that we are drawn to this place as the pandemic brings home the truth of our mortality. Gannett's message echoes among us now, insisting that life itself can be trusted to return and abide. Now, listen again, this time to the Reverend Richard W. Boynton's words, Unity's minister from 1900 to 1907. He led the congregation during the planning, financing, and construction of this building. And he issued this invitation in 1905, putting the congregation's children first.
The children of Unity Sunday School and the older members and friends of Unity Church are cordially invited to a groundbreaking festival to to be held on the site of the new church, corner Portland Avenue and Grotto Street. Let us gather in goodly numbers, the children bringing spade and shovel with which to dig.
Gathering in goodly numbers, with children bringing spade and shovel with which to dig, Boynton's own 2-year-old daughter, Mary, turned the first spade of dirt, and Theodore, the young son of member Charles Ames, turned the second. This was a community inspired by serving their children, devoted to future generations, and an aspirational longing for what we now name as beloved community. Today, this place is made holy by that same longing and aspiration as we continue gathering in goodly numbers, with our children bringing their curiosity and energy for the many ways we are still building a new church within and beyond these walls. The Reverend Wallace W. Robbins, minister from 1938 to 1944, later underscored this orientation toward new generations and a future as yet unknown. He said,
"It is for us to bear in our hearts the concerted good of the past, that we may feel the strength of the heritage and be thankful, but dedicate ourselves to the future, a future of active religion together."
Our future orientation was not meant to leave the past behind, but to draw from it and be grateful for it. And today, we might add, be honest about it and willing to change course where the future of active religion requires us to do. The Reverend Robbins also prayed this prayer for reality.
O God, who hates illusion and loves reality, grant us a strong grasp of facts and a fair vision of truth, that neither the frights of pain nor the baits of false hopes may misdirect us, nor may we be kept from seeking you with a brave heart.
When we talk about brave space today, we are drawing from our own history. Our commitment to be vulnerable enough to learn from our past errors is embedded in the values expressed within these walls for decades. Not just as an outward bravery, but first and foremost, emphasizing the inward courage of examining our own souls and hearts through spiritual practices. The Reverend Arthur Foote, minister of this congregation from 1945 to 1970s, said this:
"Few things are more important in the religious life than the development of a certain inwardness. The liberal often says that conduct is basic to religion, but even more fundamental is the integrity and purity of motive from which good conduct springs. Be a pilgrim, not to some distant land, but in search of your own soul."
Arthur Foote's message echoes across time in our commitment spoken today to greet the holy, however we name it, within, among, and beyond us. On this first Sunday of Advent, I ask you to consider, are we open to Advent's most prophetic promise? The understanding that the holy is here within us and among us, revealed not just inside these walls, but in our own hearts and in our lived faith and in what our faith calls us to do beyond these walls. The Reverend Roy Phillips, Unity's minister from 1971 to 1999, declared this:
"There is a wisdom available to us, around us and within us, a wisdom which is greater than we think. We can trust the unconscious, can trust the events of the world outside ourselves, trust them to work amazingly, creatively upon us, for us. We are to do the bidding of this creativity. We are to await its visitations receptively. Its truth and its mercy are struggling within and among us, seeking birth out into a waiting world.
Truth and mercy are struggling within and among us, seeking birth out into a waiting world. The evergreen promise of Advent, my friends, is the incarnate promise of this community of faith, a community with a history running through 2 world wars on distant shores, and many more near wars of local strife and uprisings, of fires and rebuilding, and through pandemics new and old. The promise of our faith is that no matter how harmful the past has been or how dire the present season, a new world awaits right here in bud. And we all have a role to play in bringing it to bloom in right relationship with others around us. The Reverend Jan Eller Isaacs, senior co-minister from 2000 to 2021, noted this last year.
The world continues to get smaller. Proximity teaches us that we are profoundly connected to one another. Rooted in this understanding, at our best, we move toward one another with respectful curiosity and humility. We have to let go of the assumption that we have all the answers. In fact, we know we don't. The strength to connect is built on the willingness to reach out to others with partial knowledge at best, knowing that we have so much more to learn, that we need to listen first and not assume that we already know. Is this not the work of the church, to love ourselves whole, to organize our compassion and learn to love our neighbors as ourselves?
Throughout our congregation's history here in St. Paul, we have been committed activists, working toward justice for all. We have also many times fallen short of these aspirations. But again, our teachings tell us not to give up, not to look away from others or from ourselves, from our identities and intentions, from our contexts and our complicity, our contributions and our failings, always opening our hearts compassionately to others and to ourselves, and opening our minds to the truths of our time. Today, after the second service at 12:30, I hope you will join me and Merrill and others from the congregation gathering at the Rondo Commemorative Plaza a few blocks from here. There, as another brief pilgrimage in place, we'll hear Marvin Anderson, a lifelong resident of the Rondo neighborhood, sharing a bit of the neighborhood's history and talking about efforts today to address some of the harm done to this neighborhood in the past. We'll wonder together, how might we be the good neighbors our faith calls us to be today? We close this morning with words from the Reverend Frederick May Elliott, Unity's minister from 1917 to 1937.
Any church must command and receive the positive loyalty of its constituent members. There must be a core of wholeheartedly devoted members whose loyalty has been built up through many years of disinterested service, surviving the test of many a clash of opinion and many a time of stress. They care so much for their church that it has become part of their very selves, as they have become part of the self of the church. They believe in their church with deep and abiding conviction. They are living stones in its edifice.
So our pilgrimage in place today, exploring the holy ground of this sanctuary, returns us to our own hearts. We, meaning you and I, gathered here and attending online, and those still making their way home from a holiday weekend, we are all living stones in the edifice of this church. Each of us a living lectionary of Holy Scripture, each of us carrying the foundational teachings of this congregation and our shared faith into the world. All of us together, learning from and bearing the weight of history and the promise of living faithfully into the days that come. Friends, let us heed Arthur Foote's charge to be a pilgrim, not to some distant land, but in search of your own soul. On this day and all days, may this place, made holy by our attention and intentions, by history's teachings and our heart's new learnings, by both our presence and our absence, may this holy place call us back again and again to our own souls, to one another and our shared faith, to our neighbors, one and all. May it be so, and amen. The closing hymn is number 1 in the gray hymnal, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door. Friends, be pilgrims, searching for your own soul, not in some distant place, but here, now, wherever you are. So may we each be living stones in the edifice of this community of faith. May we together build the foundation of a better world. Go in peace.